Oh, hello and welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and as you can see, I am trapped in the machine. Uh, I found myself, I figured I might as well come clean with all of you. I am, uh, I am locked within a mechanism of deterministic nature, and the mechanical nature of this mechanism has been imposing its will upon me, especially in the last week again. I've since Wednesday, I've been experiencing quite a bad depression again, and I won't say I'm entirely free of it. So the background today and the topic today is most appropriate because I have been uh, trying as best I can to take advantage of the opportunity of being locked inside the machine and being trapped in the machine like Charlie Chaplin in modern times, being grinded by the gears and going through all the mechanisms and having really no say in the matter. I have done the best I can to meditate and to observe and to contemplate what is it exactly that is throwing the mechanical algorithms of my lower animal mortal self. What is throwing them into a tizzy? Why are they raging in the subconscious mind? Because that's what depression is. It's subconscious rage, it's anger, it's an unfulfilled desire that is causing a particular psychological aggregate, or we could say ego or demon or whatever you want, whatever terminology you want to use, but it's it's a mechanical facet of nature. It is an algorithm who wants to run its program. And while I have spent many years meditating on the particular demon that I suffer from, that's also the cause of my epilepsy and not just depression, I have I know the nature of that demon's its primary nature to be fear and the desire to control and the desire to control outcomes. But in the end, what what does it fear the most? And we have to step back, if you will. And sure, we can talk about mechanical nature and we can say, it's a machine, and that's important. It's important to understand just what gives mechanical nature meaning and purpose. Because what I have come to know about myself is that I am being denied the opportunity, the platform to be useful. And there's a reason for that. I am being allowed to conduct these live streams every Sunday, same time, because it is an opportunity for me to be helpful but not useful. You might, in your mind, hear those words, and your mind might not compute that and might say, well, you're splitting hairs. This is just a terminology. But I beg to differ. It was on a walk. We finally got some nice weather today, as a matter of fact, and I managed to muster up enough strength to go out for a walk. And when when people tell you that depression is a debilitating syndrome, that it's a condition that uh, drains you of your energy and drains you of your strength, they really do mean that in as literal a way as you can imagine. Because for the first kilometer of my walk, it felt like at any given moment, one of my legs was going to give out, just collapse beneath the weight of me. It was such an arduous. It was like, I don't know. It was like I was carrying a 50 or 60 pound rucksack on my back or something. Um, but on that walk, I had the opportunity to contemplate, finally, in some sunshine and some fresh air, and maybe with some clarity and getting some movement into the body and everything. These are all good for dealing with and coping with and symptoms of depression anyway. And something occurred to me as I was asking the question of myself: why why do I feel so unneeded? When we contemplate that question, the need to be needed, the need to feel useful. And we step back from that just for a moment, and we look at society and civilization in general for a very, very long time, but especially, maybe not especially, but certainly for the last few generations, and certainly the greatest generation, as they are called, to be useful, to be needed. In other words, to have a trade, a vocation, an occupation, a profession, gainful employment. In simplest terms, to have a job and have a career. This has been one of the defining aspects of humanity here in the West, certainly since I've been on the planet. So for the last 50 years, this is one of the first questions they would ask a child. Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And if you ask any behavioral psychologist or psychologist in general, they will tell you that meaning and purpose is an absolute necessity. It's on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The need to feel needed, the need to be productive in some way, to work. I have been denied that for a very long time. And I have tried to turn my purpose, which is to serve Attlas, to serve my innermost, into work. And I have been denied that. But I'm here doing this live stream. There is a fundamental, I hesitate to use the word paradox, but there's a catch, right? There's a little problem that seems to be expressing itself, certainly in my experience in my life, that what I was born to do certainly is the work, the path, and I am needed by my higher self. But as much as I have tried to turn that into a job, into a career, into a vocation, whereby I can feel needed by others and whereby I can feel useful to others in the sense of work, in the sense of profession, in the sense of vocation, that has time and again been denied me. My efforts to do so have been kiboshed. They've been blocked, they've been curtailed, they've been cut off at the knees, so to speak. And this begs the question about this whole concept of needing a job and needing to be important or needing to be needed. And needing to be productive. Is there a disconnect, a fundamental disconnect between our higher self's approach to mastering mechanical nature and mechanicity versus our approach, the mortal approach, the so-called human approach to mastery and meaning and purpose, which for me, those things are almost interchangeable, they're practically inseparable, meaning they are interchangeable in a sense. That attaining mastery in one's life, the mastery of a craft, for instance, the mastery of a musical instrument, or some trade. You even have the expression master plumber, master electrician, master carpenter. These are real expressions that have genuine, real, practical meaning in the world. Someone who has accumulated so much experience, knowledge, and skill at a trade that they can don the title master, that they are a master of that trade. And of course, we use that word to describe many vocations. Again, coming back to artists, artistry, musicians, etc., sculptors, and the list goes on. There can be many kinds of masters. And certainly the mastery of some vocation, trade, profession, art form, what have you, in an external sense, that provides a path to a kind of mastery, a level of mastery, if you will, or a flavor of mastery that has a direct connection and that provides us a sense of fulfillment, particularly if that is what we were here and born to do, to achieve mastery on some level, on some, vertical path. But for many, and I would argue the vast majority of people in society, they don't seek mastery in their work. To them, a job is a means to an end. It gives them something to do, but more importantly, it gives them a living. It gives them the means to live the life they want to live in the level of comfort and security that they are accustomed to or that they desire to enjoy. So they go to their 9 to 5, Monday to Friday job so that they can enjoy their weekends with their hobbies, traveling, with their family and friends, etc. And when I say 9 to 5 job, I realize that those don't really exist anymore. They're more like 7 to 7 or 7 to 10. But you get the idea. It was an old cliche, the 9 to 5 job, the 5-day work week, even though that's practically a thing of the past, right? The 70, 80-hour work week is more or less the norm these days. But regardless, the media and the economists are constantly, excuse me, they're constantly talking about the unemployment rate. And we have been inundated with images and stories of, people out of work, in standing in soup lines and standing for government handouts and so on, the forlorn, the destitute, the out of work. And this is shown to be this tragedy of the commons, like a tragedy among humans. Like if you lose your job, you lose your livelihood, but more importantly, you've lost your purpose for being if you lose your job. It's this catastrophic, calamitous event. And when they interview people, homeless people or out of work individuals who have been out of work for a long time and they can't find work, regardless of how hard they try, to the best of their efforts, it's just, and they interview them and you always get this, or you often get the same sort of response, the same sort of answer, that they feel listless and purposeless. They feel useless. And again, embedded in that, implied in that, is this inherent need to be useful. And not only to be useful, but to witness one's utility actualized in the world. Because to be useful is one thing. I could be very useful in a number of different ways. I'm not being utilized, but that doesn't make me useless necessarily. However, the fact that I'm being underutilized or not being utilized, that means that my potential utility or potential usefulness is not being realized, it's not being actualized. I am not being put to good use. It's like being a resource that's, again, not being utilized. It's like a wasted resource. It's a wasted opportunity. And in business, they actually have a term to describe unrealized potential, right? And they call it it's related to opportunity costs. The cost of choosing one thing and not another. So the cost of pursuing one set of values over here and not utilizing another potential set of values over here. Now, if you've been if you've been paying close attention to my language here, you will discover that the words that I am using are very mechanical in nature. This notion of utility, of untapped resources or underutilized resources. To what degree, I wonder, is humanity's obsession with work and jobs and being needed, to what degree is that so-called hierarchy of needs, that need to be useful, that need to be needed, to what degree is that a mechanical, egoic interpretation and indeed twisting and corruption of meaning, of the true longing, which is to be? I've often said the in a kind of sort of trite, clever way that we are meant to be human beings, not human doings. And if your mind reacts to that and says, yeah, but how am I supposed to get anything done? Well, the answer is be a human being done. And this turns on the question of mechanicity, because machines cease to be if they are not doing. If they are not doing what they were made to do, their purpose for being ceases to be. They essentially don't exist, because all they have is what they are. And we can look at this from the standpoint of a hammer. Like, let's keep it simple. I know that today I've revealed the fact that I am trapped in a very complex machine. But for the sake of argument, let's really simplify and look at a hammer. A hammer is a machine. It's a very simple machine, but it's a machine. It's a tool. And it is an extension of the body And it gives the person wielding that hammer an ability to focus and concentrate their strength in such a way that they can drive a nail or they can pull a nail. That's what a hammer is. It gives you the ability to channel the kinetic force, the physical strength in your arm, and focus it through the hammerhead, through the handle to the hammerhead, and using the arc and the swing, the acceleration, and all the other laws of physics and laws of motion and laws of mechanics that go into that particular relationship between the hammer and the arm and the carpenter. That tool makes of that person a carpenter. It's one who can drive nails and pull nails. And there's an expression you may be familiar with. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When all you have is a hammer, everything begins to look like a nail. We often encounter these idioms, these cliches, and we never stop to unpack them, to really comprehend what is being said there. And what is being said there is that if you define yourself mechanically as a tool, as a machine, then your whole life will revolve around being needed as that tool, as that machine. So, in other words, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, your entire life will revolve around driving nails or pulling nails. And your sense of self-worth and your sense of self-actualization will revolve around whether or not you are driving nails or pulling nails. But there is an inherent problem with that. Because the ability to drive nails and pull nails is the purpose and function of the hammer. It's a tool, it's a machine. It's a doing, it's a mechanical activity. And last week we talked about what it means to be spiritual. And this week I promised you the secrets to mastering mechanicity. Does it sound like in your gut? Does it resonate? Does it sound like in your gut that mastery should be defined by a tool, by a machine, and that mastering mechanicity comes from being defined by that mechanicity? Because to me, that that doesn't sound like mastery of mechanical nature and mastering mechanicity. That to me, that sounds like being enslaved by it, being subject to it, whereby I begin to define myself, my ability to be to be happy, to be fulfilled, based on whether or not I am doing this mechanical activity of hammering nails or pulling nails, which I could not do and cannot do without a hammer. This is worthwhile from a very practical, everyday, even if we're not talking about, existential questions and, vocational crises and, crises of being and purpose and meaning, all that aside, something as simple as your smartphone or your tablet PC or any of the screens that we see dominating people's lives these days. And make no mistake, people are being dominated by screens. They're slaves to their phones. They're slaves to social media, to TikTok, to Reddit, to even Facebook and well, certainly Instagram, and on they go. Right? But they're slaves to the algorithm, and they're slaves to their followers, and they're being dominated by the memes and the kangaroo court of internet opinion, especially influencers. The irony there is that influencers like to think that they're creating all of this content, this information that they're sharing or that they're selling to the public. But the reality is, what they're doing is they are selling views to Google, right? To whatever platform, or to Meta, right? They are selling their followers, and their followers' eyeballs are being sold to whatever platform they happen to be on. And they're selling those views and eyeballs to whatever advertisers are sponsoring their channel. That's what influencers are actually doing. They're salespeople. They're not influencing anything. They are aggregating eyeballs, aggregating attention, pooling it, and then selling that pool to those who want access to those eyeballs. So the word influencer is ironic, even on that simple level. There are many tools in our life which we adopted, and took on board because we thought it made our lives easier and better. And over time, we've discovered the hard way that aspects of ourselves have atrophied as a result of our reliance on those tools. How many people can do even simple mathematical equations in their head anymore? And that's not since the smartphone, that's since the advent of the pocket calculator. I remember having to memorize our times tables in elementary school. But then once we were allowed to use calculators in high school, I freely admit that my memory for the basic times tables started to diminish. And every now and then I encounter, 6 times 7 and I go, "What what's that? 54? 42?" And it's like I can't remember. I can't remember what 6 times 7 is anymore. Whereas in elementary school, I had to remember and I knew those all the entire times tables, right? From 0 to 9. 9 times 9 is 81 and so on. Now we're all the way to 12 or 15 or however high we had to go on learning the times tables. I see. I can't even remember that. I remember 12 times 12 was 144. I remember that. So I think it was up to 12 we needed to learn our times tables. But by the time I was in high school math and we were allowed to use calculators, well, I started to get lazy. I started to punch in 6 times 7 into the calculator. And whether it's GPS that has resulted in no one having a sense of direction anymore, to uh, your planner, your calendar for all your appointments and everything, so nobody can remember, or nobody can remember anybody's birthday anymore because it's all programmed into your Google Calendar or whatever you use as your planner, and then you get reminders of so and so's birthday. This is your anniversary coming up. It's your dentist appointment, and so on and so on and so forth. Now, in all fairness, we have a lot to think about. We have a lot to remember. And you don't want to miss your appointment, especially when your doctor or your dentist charges you if you're late or if you miss your appointment outright, right? So there's a reason why we turn to these tools to make sure that we're on time and on schedule. But at the same time that we've done that, one cannot help but see from another perspective, from another point of view, that we've become slaves to these devices. We become slaves to that schedule, to that appointment calendar, and then it runs our lives. And the psychologist will say, "Yeah, but this is important. This is what gives a purpose. This is what gives a human being purpose and meaning in their life. This utility, that you are useful, that you are needed, that you are fulfilling some purpose for the greater good, where the greater good is defined by political, economic, and political and socioeconomic definitions." No matter how you slice it, on in many, many, many aspects, when you look at the modern world and what people do for a living, and what they do in order to feel useful, in order to feel needed and feel wanted, and that they are making a difference, that they are being productive, and that their skills and abilities and talents are being utilized, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, it's it seems like it leans more toward people finding their place as a cog in the machine. Now, how can I say that? Because that's a hot take. That's a bold statement. I am reducing people now to essentially being cogs in a machine, to not having any free will, or to willingly molding themselves and shaping themselves in order to find their niche in the big machine where they can slot themselves in and be useful and be productive and fit in to the big system, to society, to the economy, right? To and so on. And probably if modern thinkers and philosophers and psychologists like Jordan Peterson, if he was here today, he would have a lot to say about that. But that's exactly what young men need. And that's exactly what they're being denied. And that's why we have an entire generation of young men who have no meaning and no purpose. And they're sitting at home in their parents' basement playing video games because they've been robbed of any meaning and purpose in their life where they can feel needed and valued, where they have no utility, where the society has told them that, especially if you're a cis white man, that you have no value and we don't want you. This perspective, rest assured, I am not lacking in empathy and sympathy when it comes to that perspective, because I freely admit I've been living under the poverty line for more than 15 years now. I've essentially been unemployed for that entire time. And no amount of effort on my part to get a job has gotten me anywhere. And I mean, like, entry level jobs to to uh, uh, I mean, when I say entry level jobs, I mean like minimum wage entry level jobs, like where sweeping warehouses jobs and retail jobs, and like, you know jobs at Best Buy and so on, right? All the way up to entry level marketing jobs, to mid level marketing research jobs. And I have an MBA in addition to my undergraduate degree. I have an MBA, and but the experience I have, it's people don't want it because my experience is all entrepreneurial. The experience I have is all working with the owners of companies. I was a consultant. I worked with the owners of companies, and I put projects together. And I was like an entrepreneurial consultant. In other words, when they read my resume, they don't read, uh, you know, honed to be a team player and a cog in the machine. Someone who we can slot them in to the gap in the machine. We have a use. We have a need for a specific um, cog to fill a gap in the operation of the machine. That's who we're looking for. So we're not looking for a free thinker or someone who thinks outside the box, or entrepreneurial, or any of these things. We want someone who's going to be a cog and that fits into the gap that we're looking to fill, the position that we're looking to fill, right? This is how companies think by and large, because they're machines. Corporations are just machines. They are not persons under the law. They're machines. They're systems. The system itself is a machine. Government is a machine. Democracy is a machine. It's a system. But again, someone like Jordan Peterson would say, yeah, but young people need that, and young men need that. They need that sense of fulfillment, of being needed, of finding their niche and finding their place in the world, and then slotting themselves in there, and then doing their thing and making their contribution. And when I observe myself in my fits of depression, and that I am not being given a platform, I'm not, a space is not opening up for me, that there doesn't seem to be a place for me in this world where I can slot myself into and do my thing and fulfill a need and be utilized and have great, tremendous utility and be needed and be useful. And that's denied me. And then because that's being denied me, something is raging in the subconscious mind that's causing my depression. Well, then how can that need be coming from my higher self? This is this is the the paradoxical conflict that needs to be addressed in coming at this question of mastering mechanicity. Because so long as we are looking for our place in the world is mechanical. It's a system. It's a series of systems stacked upon each other and interlaced with one another, interacting with one another. Even in biology, when we talk about infinite complexity, we talk about ecosystems, where there are systems of systems. And sure, in biology, we can talk about collective symbiosis and the infinite complexity of that. But mastery means to master. And somehow there is a delicate balance of accepting a series of constraints provisionally, and that those constraints lead to mastery, which then trivialize the constraints. That might be too heady or too abstract a concept. So we will spend some time to flesh that out in a moment. But first, Benjamin says, in my current role, I've developed a skill that people across the company rely on whenever they need something done properly. Although the work I do can sometimes feel insignificant in the larger scheme of things, I take pride in consistently delivering whenever I'm called upon. At times, I feel like just one cog is a much sorry, one just one cog in a much bigger machine. Yet I humbly accept that role with gratitude because I recognize it as a blessing to be trusted and needed. That's certainly a healthy way to look at your present circumstances. and what you're and what you're doing. Humility and gratitude, certainly. But again, it's this interesting notion that I'm, making this contribution, and that it's a blessing to be trusted and needed. What would happen if you weren't? What would happen to your humility and your gratitude if that was taken away from you? I'm not trying to be argumentative, because at present, it's a rhetorical question. It's a rhetorical question. It's just something you might consider asking yourself in meditation. What would happen to my humility and gratitude were being needed and trusted by others? What if that was taken away? Because it was taken away from me, and it's been denied me on any sort of larger meaningful scale for a long, long time. All I have been allowed to do is this podcast and look after my mom and my dad, which of course is not it's not nothing. That's not nothing. That's a child's responsibility, family responsibility, certainly. But now that they're gone, I'm still being denied that. So I don't even have that anymore. And I'm just relaying that this plays a huge part in the depression that I suffer from, which means it cannot it cannot originate from my higher self. The desire to be needed, the desire to have utility, to be trusted, to be heard, to be listened to. And this is, but when we have these things, right, we feel grateful and we feel happy and grateful and humbled that we were given this opportunity to be trusted, to be useful, to have utility, to be heard, to contribute, that we were called upon, and we were given that opportunity, and we fulfilled that role, and then when we received the rewards, the benefits of that. And I've had family members tell me that I should go and volunteer, and I should do volunteer work, because doing volunteer work will scratch that itch. It will fill that void of needing to be useful, of needing to be productive, of feeling like I belong somewhere and that I'm a part of a team and I'm contributing to the system, to the machine in some meaningful way. And that I have the time, I have that there's no reason why I shouldn't go and volunteer, and that I would be doing good in the process. I would be helping people. But I it's the same thing keeps me from going down that path is the same thing that kept me from staying in Japan to teach English, where I was wanted, where I was needed, where I was trusted. And not only that, I was offered an entire life of comfort and security to stay and fulfill that utility of teaching English to Japanese people. So there's this seeming paradox where I am not allowed, because I do not go against the will of my innermost. It's that um, my being needs me more than anyone else. And my true self, my higher self, takes precedent over the desire of Attila to feel wanted and feel needed and feel useful. The desire of the demon to be heard and to be seen and to have sway over others, to be that influencer. With hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers on YouTube watching my YouTube channel. But I don't have that. I have a few hundred, or maybe a few thousand. That's it. And these live streams, we average somewhere around 10 people, give or take. So maybe 8 people, give or take. But this is not a problem to my higher self. It's only a problem to something inside of me, in my subconscious mind, that rages that for example, my book is not selling, or that it doesn't matter who I send a copy of my book to, I can't get uh, anyone's interest or attention to have me on their podcast, for example. There's a tremendous fear which is raging, and the fear is that I will shuffle off this mortal coil and never make a difference. That I will have squandered this potential, the potential to change people's lives, the potential to help others, the potential to uh, fulfill my higher purpose. And it's this maddening pull whereby I have fully committed myself to this work of my higher self. I wrote the book. I do these live streams. I but it doesn't go anywhere. It has no effect. It makes no impact. What came to mind, and I'm gonna bring it back to mechanicity for just a moment. Think of um, uh, a water truck or a pipeline, indoor plumbing. Even the Romans, right? The aqueducts, right? They would distribute water from its source throughout the countryside and throughout the city. It's effectively the birth of indoor plumbing. Or you think of a water truck or right, like a fire truck, and then with its hoses and so on. Compare that to an oasis. Now, the nature of an oasis is that it just is there. It's there in the middle of a desert. No civilization for miles and hundreds of miles, potentially, in all directions. An oasis can be out literally in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a desolate wasteland. But there it is, in the middle of all that desert. And, fans of deserts will tell me, oh, that desert is teeming with life, and don't be so harsh on the desert. And yeah, I get it. Okay. But there's no human settlements. But the oasis is there. And because the oasis is there, for those who are crossing the desert, or indeed those who are wandering in the desert and lost in the desert, who stumble upon that oasis, they will not hesitate, and they do not question, and they do not resist. They freely drink, and they freely rest under the shade of the palm trees, and they drink from the well, or from the spring, or whatever the source of the water is for that oasis. And with great humility and gratitude, they thank God, or they thank the universe, that oasis was there for them on that journey, or that they happened to stumble across it while they were wandering in the desert, because that oasis gave them life and renewed their strength and renewed their hope and their will, and allowed them to continue on their journey. From the point of view of the oasis never gets to know if the travelers who stopped and partook of its water and partook of its shade, the oasis never gets to know if they were successful or not in their journey, if they made it across the desert successfully, or they made it to where they wanted to go, and so forth. The oasis doesn't get to know that. And more importantly, the oasis doesn't get to move. You want to talk about a metaphor or an allegory for being? The oasis is that. It is. An oasis is. An oasis doesn't move. Oasis has no aqueducts or motorized pumps pumping water through pipelines or aqueducts across the desert to get its water to where the people are. That's not how oases work. It just is. And people come to it or they don't. And the oasis has no say in that. When you think about it, the oasis doesn't really care. I mean, perhaps it cares, but it I don't think the oasis sits there dreaming of what it must be like to be an aqueduct, to be part of a municipal water system whereby people rely on you day in and day out, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Where you are literally in people's faces and in people's lives all the time. And they become reliant on you, on that system, and that systems of pumps and pipes that we call plumbing, that people take for granted. You ever see how people use and abuse their water supply? I guarantee you that people do not take for granted the water in an oasis. But do you see how the water supply, the indoor plumbing, and the pumps and the faucets and the taps and all the rest of it, all of that machinery, all of that mechanicity that's that's in people's faces and in people's lives 24/7, that is part of the system, that has found its place, and that is that and it's an essential aspect of civilization, let's say. But what it delivers gets taken for granted, gets ignored. It's just content, it's just water. But there's this desire, there's this need to feel the utility, to be needed, to be wanted every day, all the time. And when you look at these so-called influencers and these so-called content creators with their channels with hundreds of thousands of people and millions of followers, they're constantly pumping out content, constantly content, 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 content. Changes no one, changes nothing. People are watching or listening on their phones or in the background while they're doing their laundry or they're doing something else. They're listening to podcasts in the background while they're playing video games or while they're mowing their lawn or, they're cleaning the house and they're listening to podcasts. They're listening to Joe Rogan and his latest guest. He's found his niche. He's in the system. He's plugged in. And he's this huge cog in that machine. He's like one of the most popular YouTube channels or Spotify channels or podcasts, whatever you want to call it, right? He's one of the most powerful influencers in that space. When was the last time you heard someone say to you, I listened to a presentation or I listened to one of Joe Rogan's podcasts and it changed my life. I'm a new person, or I'm completely changing the direction of my life because of it, because of that podcast. And not just because you listen to one podcast, but you listen to it on a regular basis. And it completely it has made you think about yourself, and has made you think about your goals and your direction in life and who you really are and why you're really here. Joe Rogan has many guests who span a great spectrum of the human condition and the human experience. Joe Rogan is and influencers like him, and the 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 channels that get fed to you through the algorithm on YouTube, they're the ones that have that nonstop flowing content. They're the aqueduct, right? They're Hoover Dam and the pumping stations and uh, the utility. Why we call it that? Like the water utility that is feeding you an endless water supply straight into your home. But the next time you find yourself lost in the desert and wandering in the desert, what good will that utility do you? And I think that if you ask someone who has been who has traveled in a desert or was lost in a desert and stumbled upon an oasis in that desert that was just being, was just there, doing what oases do, which are wait and keep themselves refreshed and keep themselves in good standing, so that when someone does arrive, they can be that oasis for them. But oases don't go out into the world looking to impose their oasisness on others. An oasis is not searching for utility. It doesn't need to be needed. It simply is. Because it certainly isn't visited daily. Or maybe it is visited daily, but maybe it's visited by little creatures, little critters, or little and the odd animal are coming to get a drink. And that of course makes the oasis happy too. Because the oasis is there to give. It's there to be helpful. It's there to give life. It's an oasis. That is what an oasis is. There's no denying it. That's its nature, to give, to be, and to be there as this source of life and hope and rest, tranquility, peace, rejuvenation, refreshment, reinvigoration. And for those in need of that, when they find it, they are very grateful indeed, and they don't take it for granted. And if they are observing themselves, and if they are humble, they will be grateful to their Divine Mother and to be led to this oasis, this serendipitous source of rejuvenation and refreshment. The the challenge for a mortal is is to embrace the attitude, or the I suppose attitude is as good a word as any, the position of the oasis versus that of the plumbing utility, the water utility. And one will always feel the tension between these two extremes in the pursuit of mastery. Because even a musician or an artist of any kind, any type of creator, will be under tremendous pressure to produce content, to be productive, to increase their output. Especially if they are picked up by the system or by someone in the system. And the system decides that, oh, okay, what this person is producing, we can sell that. There's value in there that we can exploit, that we can utilize. There's utility in this individual, in other words. And we can utilize that. We can exploit that utility. And while as the individual may feel suddenly needed and wanted and listened to and heard because they are being given a platform, with that platform come the demands. With the platform comes the caveats, the fine print, the contracts. And say, sure, we'll publish your book, but then you're on contract to write us 5 more books in 5 years, as an example. Or we'll finance your movie, but then you're under contract, an exclusive contract with us for the next 10 years. And any movie you make has to be through us, and we have the final say on whether your movie gets done or not. Someone who decides to become a master of a particular instrument and they play no other instrument. They don't branch out. They don't try different things. They just exclusively play one instrument. They may indeed master that instrument, but then one day they wake up and they realize, I've shackled myself to this instrument. This instrument owns me now because I can't do anything else. I can't play anything else. I have a good friend, Wolfgang, who likes to say, jack of all trades, master of all trades, where the typical idiom says, jack of all trades, master of none. And that idiom is born of the idea that, you need this 10,000 hours of exclusive doing one thing to master it, and so on and so forth. But again, these are very mechanical, superficial ways and simplistic ways of looking at mastery. But the Renaissance masters were masters precisely because they were masters of many things. In the modern era, you can look to someone as, oh gosh, what is that actor's name? I'm drawing a blank. Let's see. Uh, I'm just have to do a search for his name because I can't. Okay, yeah. So he played Hans Landa in Inglourious Bastards. Christoph Waltz. He speaks like 6 languages, and not only he doesn't only speak in 6 languages. He speaks fluently as a native speaker in 6 languages. He can act in 6 languages without an accent, and including English. I just throw this up. I just did I just did a Google search for him, and right, this is what pops up. So, and if you remember the scenes from the film and Glorious Bastards, and also Django Unchained, he speaks fluent English, German, French, Italian, and I believe Dutch or Swedish. Anyway, uh, it's something like 6 languages he speaks, and he can act. And I mean, he won Oscars for both his performances in Django Unchained and in Glorious Bastards. We know he can act, and he can act in all of those languages, and he does in Inglourious Bastards in multiple languages: Italian, French, and English, and German. And in fact, Quentin Tarantino, when he was casting for that role, at one point he just after seeing, you know, I don't know how many actors who were auditioning for the role. At one point, he just collapsed in his chair and he looked over at his casting director and he said, "Did I create an impossible character here? Did I write a character that cannot exist, that cannot be brought to life?" And moments later, Christoph Waltz came into the studio and performed his audition for Hans Landa, and Quentin Tarantino jumped up in his chair and he was like, and he knew he had found his Hans Landa, because Christoph Waltz seamlessly and flawlessly performed all 4 language roles to perfection, because it is clear with how he approaches language and the pronunciation of language that he is a master of language. He's not a master of Italian and a master of German and a master of French and a master of English. He is a master of language. And I have no doubt that if he sat himself down and applied himself to Spanish or Hungarian or Polish or Japanese or any number of languages in a very short period of time, he would be picking them up. And if he immersed themselves after 6 months in any of those cultures, he would be speaking fluently without an accent. Because mastery is about accepting a limited number of constraints that develop the wherewithal, the skills and abilities that allow one to transcend those limitations and many more limitations in the process. This is what it means to become a master, to master something, where the limitations no longer apply. They're not limitations. They are jumping off points. They're springboards. So in that context, when we are at our job, as Benjamin points out, okay, in his earlier comment, where he says, at times, I feel like just one cog in a much bigger machine, yet I humbly accept that role with gratitude because I recognize it as a blessing to be trusted and needed. There's also an opportunity there to excel and to surpass expectations. Now, this can be dangerous because you can inadvertently trigger envy and resentment among others because you will be seen as a scab or as a brown noser or as, or rocking the boat or making other people look bad. So there's always a there are always considerations to be made as to how we choose to excel and in what way. But no matter where we are in and no matter how the system or the environment that we are in, the limitations constrain us. Within those constraints are opportunities to mobilize and excel and exceed and transcend. So in my case, I am being denied. I'm in this machine. I'm trapped in this mech, these machinations of my own making, of my own mind. And all machines want to be needed. They need to show their utility. They need to find their place in the system and to be utilized. But that's being denied to me. So within the constraints of being trapped within a machine that desires to be needed, to be trusted, to be heard, to be listened to, what is it? What is the nature of the mastery then? What am I here to master? If not that machine itself and those so-called needs and desires, the desire to be heard, the desire to have a platform. And again, it's coming back to that oasis and indoor plumbing, right? The utility versus the oasis analogy. And that the constraint is the reverse of it's not being a cog in the machine. It's not being mechanical. It's not being a part of the system, being unplugged from that system, and simply being adjacent to the system. Or, to use a different analogy, to be the ghost in the machine. But it's a different kind of mastery. It's an internal mastery, not an external one. It's not a matter of becoming a master of a musical instrument or a master of some system or some vocation, or it's simply a matter of being. And And in order to be that oasis, what we have to master is the desire, is the need itself to be heard, to be in people's faces, to be a pipe and a pump, pumping water into people's homes, into millions of homes. You see, there's a duality to this concept of mastery, because Joe Rogan, it would be hard to argue that he isn't a master of the podcast formula, or Cutie Pie, or any of these influencers that have millions of followers. Mr. Beast is another one, that literally have millions of followers on YouTube. They have mastered something, all right, but have they really mastered mechanicity? They have mastered a formula. They have figured out, they have mastered playing the game. They have mastered the algorithm and some formula for accumulating a huge audience. But in order to sustain that, they have to constantly fulfill the system's demand for content. And there's this feedback loop. So they might want a platform with millions of followers, fine. So they have that. But now the platform they have with millions of followers demands a constant churning out of content. And that's what it is, content. And it has no inherent intrinsic value anymore, because of how it has made, and forgive, the specific use of language here that I'm about to invoke, but it's an unholy alliance in order to be heard, in order to gain that platform and those millions of followers and the ability to speak directly to tens of millions of people, and the ability to shift the cultural zeitgeist a degree or two in one direction or the other direction, just by virtue of the platform that he has shackled himself and coveted himself to a kind of indentured servitude to the algorithm, to the machine, to a constant pumping out of content to feed the very platform that gives him the reach and the audience. That audience and that reach is voracious, and its hunger is endless, insatiable. It is a bottomless pit that you can keep dumping content into it, and it goes nowhere, and it creates nothing except more demand, more emptiness. one of the things that depression as a form of suffering gives one is an appreciation for how uh, nothing helps. So, in other words, when you're depressed, you might look to distraction. You might look to, video games or junk food or any number of things, shopping or buying something or watching something or like, but nothing works, nothing helps. And anything that purports to offer you some relief from the depression is a false idol. It's a false god because it's mechanical. And when you're suffering from depression after multiple days, sometimes you start to get desperate and you don't know what to do with yourself. You're so desperate to get away from the symptoms of the depression. You're so desperate to find a reprieve, you're willing to try just about anything. And very little can actually pull you out of it. But that experience is a gift because it's a clue to the nature of the desire that is causing the depression in the first place. And in my case, that desire, that longing to be useful, to have my life's work turned into something of utility for the maximum people to benefit from, that's a false idol. That's a false, it's a desire that the entity, the demon in me wants me to believe will make me happy and will give me fulfillment. And it might for some short period of time. But the demands that would place on me and the demand to constantly churn out content would eventually lead to a compromise of content for content's sake, or me having to fill in like feed the beast. Benjamin says, I watched the anime Full Metal Alchemist, and one of the principles it highlights is the law of equivalent exchange. The idea that in order to gain or create something, an equivalent price must first be paid. I suppose the people you mentioned paid that price through years of effort, discipline, and sacrifice in order to attain mastery of their craft and platform. Um, what I'm suggesting, Benjamin, is that I can't speak for them necessarily, but in my case, uh, one of the things that would have to be sacrificed is my integrity. And what I'm suggesting, and I know it's you shouldn't throw stones in glass houses. But what I'm suggesting is the desire, the need, or to have that kind of reach and that kind of platform, um, what they sacrifice. Yeah, sure, there's a lot of effort and discipline and sacrifice that goes into it, but something else gets sacrificed as well. And that gets explored in Faust. And while I'm not saying necessarily that these people have sold their soul, compromises have been made, and they operate what they do functions to feed the beast, feed the machine. In other words, they are cogs in the machine, and that machine is adding to the illusion. It's adding to the hypnosis. And that I have for a very long time believed that there is a way to have the machine work for us, because surely the masters, Michelangelo, for instance, and the other master sculptors whose names elude me, but you've seen their work when they do the Virgin Mary, and there's silk, sheer silk across her face, and you swear to God, you look at that that carving, that sculpture, and it's like you want to be able to reach out and and peel back the veil of silk across the Virgin Mary's face until you realize it's all stone, right? So that was done with tools, simple tools, but tools nonetheless. But it also, I think, must be realized that when the masters were doing what they were doing, maybe a part of them was worried about how many people were going to see it or listen to it or hear it. Like, for example, in the case of Mozart, who was not good with money, and he was destitute and a poor man, nearing the end of his life. And so surely, I mean, we see this dramatized in Amadeus. It's hard to know just how true it was that certain of his operas were only played, 6 or 7 times in the State Opera House. Well, that wouldn't have been enough to sustain his lifestyle. So, of course, the mortal part of us is always worried about survival, right? And comfort and security and providing for our family and so on and so forth. So there's a practical level here. And many people will say that there is no conflict, there is no problem with meshing those two things. Your life's work with your mortal job and your livelihood. And so there's many people who charge for the teachings. And I don't have a window into the souls of men, and I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to speak for them, but all I can say is that for myself, that crossover has largely been denied. And it's been denied, likely because of the integrity and the purity of the message that I'm here to deliver, like the purity of the essence of the water in the oasis. It it doesn't matter, like the water that comes out of your tap is never going to be the same as the water you find in oasis in the middle of the desert. That's just a fact. The water that comes on your tap, out of your tap, is never going to be fresh mountain spring water that you find in the wilderness. It just isn't. And taking that water and putting it into a plastic bottle and putting a lovely label on it and putting it in the grocery store, likewise diminishes and belittles it. It's no longer the same. It's not the same. It doesn't matter that it was drawn from that source. It's not the same. And your experience of it is not the same. It won't taste the same. It won't make you feel the same. And it won't have the same effect on your life as it would had you gone into the wilderness to the source of that spring water and taken a draft of it with your hands. This is, I think, where I'm being led with all of this, that there is a deeper, more profound, and more foundational, existential level of mechanicity here, where mastery is born, where genuine mastery is born. And that is the freedom, the complete freedom and liberation from the need to be a utility, the need for utility. Because it is only from the need of utility that is born, and talk about language, right? And the magic of words, futility. Because that's one of the things that I felt in my depression, is that it's the futility of trying to speak to people who do not want to listen to what I have to say, and trying to share the truth with people who do not want to hear the truth. And it's just, there's a futility there. Well, there's only a futility there if there's a need for utility, if a need to be heard, a need to be believed, and a need to change people's lives. That's tap water. The need to pump the water into people's homes and change their lives forever. That's mechanical. That's a machine. That's a utility. And if they take it for granted, they leave their taps on, right? Or they don't drink it. They still drink soda pop or whatever, right? Or they, you know what I mean? Like, then you can feel futility, because the utility is not being utilized correctly, or it's being taken for granted. But that futility is only born of that mechanical need. That is an egotistical need. The need to be heard, the need to be utilized, the need to contribute and be a part of something. That's ego. Benjamin also says, I can relate to your present situation to the moment when Jesus Christ was tempted to turn stones into bread. In a similar way, the ego often tempts us to compromise our principles or transform something sacred solely for material gain. I believe our true pursuit should be the kind of faith and integrity that God ultimately blesses. Well, I hadn't thought about stones into bread. Jesus was tested and tempted a lot in that way. People would say, well, if you're the Son of God, do this, or if you're the Son of God, do that. The irony is that sometimes he did perform miracles, right? So that's the irony, is that, but you see, again, there's a case where Jesus did what he was told to do. He served his Father in heaven. He did not succumb to the whims of the people around him who wanted to see proof, or who wanted to, perhaps in their own way, trivialize him by making him perform parlor tricks. I have, in the past, I've invoked the characters from Beauty and the Beast. Now, if you recall the story, an enchantress comes to a castle disguised as an old woman, and she asks for shelter, but the spoiled prince um, turns her away because she's so ugly, and she warns him not to judge her based on her appearance, because that type of beauty is only skin deep. True beauty comes from within. And he's really unimpressed, and he sends her away, and then she transforms into a beautiful enchantress, and it turns out that it was a test, and he tries to apologize, but she says, no, 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 you're not getting off so easily. And she casts a spell on the castle and all who live there. She turns the prince into a beast. His inner ugliness comes to the surface, and that's how he has to live. And all of the servants in the castle, they are transformed into things, into candlesticks and teapots and so on and so forth. They are basically transformed into machines, material things. And that's the setup for the story. And the spell is he has to find he has to learn how to love, and in turn find someone willing to love him by his 21st birthday, I think. And then, in order for the spell to be broken, otherwise he'll stay a beast forever. And Belle is beauty, and she comes into his life, and of course, you know the rest of the story. But in the Disney version of this story, we have Lumiere here sing a song, Be Our Guest. And in that song is that lyric, life is so unnerving for a servant who's not serving. He's not whole without a soul to wait upon. And in this meme, I point out that this is about serving our innermost Lord and Master. This is what a servant serves, or who a servant serves. And that anything beyond that is superfluous. It's a servant serves others who, let's say, who come to the house, right? That's what the whole song is about. Be our guest. You know, the whole song is about they're dusty, they're lazy, they're everything because they have nobody to serve. They have no guests to serve. But even in that event, they're serving the guest because they are a guest of the castle. They are a guest of the master. And this brings me to the other matter of mastery. Benjamin said earlier, when he said, no, where did he say this? Yes, he said, I suppose the people you mentioned paid the price through years of effort, discipline, and sacrifice in order to attain mastery of their craft and platform. You see, there is a difference between the mortal who masters something and the mortal who achieves mastery by serving their innermost. It is possible through sheer force of will and mechanical practice to become a master at some mechanical thing. And you can become a millionaire and a billionaire by mastering mechanicity through your own ego, through your own mechanical self. There's no question. But again, this is a Faustian bargain. This is a false mastery because you, the mortal, call yourself master, and other people call you master of this, that, or the other thing. But it's your ego, it's your mortal, mechanical self who is just mastering other machines, or he's a master of the system, masterfully working the system. But what of your innermost master? Are you serving your master? And the reason why this quote I love so much, life is so unnerving for a servant who's not serving. He's not whole without a soul to wait upon. That soul is our higher self, our monad. And what is unnerving about it is fear. If you are not serving your monad, if you are not serving your higher self, if you are not serving your innermost master, you are living in fear. By definition. Because mechanical nature exists in a state of fear. Fear of death, fear of ceasing to exist, fear of not doing. If you are not serving your innermost, then you have to be being utilized. You've got to be doing something that other people value and think is important to fill the hole, the gaping hole in your heart that you are not serving your master. And because you're not achieving genuine mastery by serving your innermost master, you have to seek mastery out there somewhere. You need to seek mastery over mechanical nature externally somehow. This is the secret. There are many master plumbers in the world today. There are many master musicians, masters of the electric guitar, masters of painting, of spray painting, of street art, of of auto racing, of surfing, of any number of things. There is incredible mastery out there in the world. And again, I don't have a window into anybody's soul. Some of it may be connected with genuine mastery, but much of it is not. Like the people who are masters of systems and masters at manipulating and playing the game and working, whether it's office politics, and then that becomes politics in general. And they're masters of charm and networking and, getting in and knowing who to know and how to know. And there's this whole other level of machinations behind the curtain that people can become masters of, and they can rise in the ranks of the global elite, and they become millionaires and billionaires because they have mastered that game. But are they real masters? They might be masters of human psychology. They might be masters of manipulation of the mechanical ego and manipulating others. They might be masters of black magic. But is that the kind of mastery that we want for ourselves? Or do we want to serve, and the feeling of fulfillment that we get from serving our innermost Lord and Master? That should be enough. And we have to comprehend that this desire to have utility in the world is an egoic desire. It's a desire to supplant the higher self with ourself. I'm the master. I'm important. I have utility. People trust me. Now, in my case, it's a little bit more subtle. It's a little bit more nuanced, but it's still based in fear. And it's a subtle and nuanced way of the ego appropriating. And as I described, I guess 2 weeks ago, when I talked about the demon riding the coattails, I've committed myself to my higher self, to the work of Attlas. But I still suffer from depression because even though I don't take credit for the good that I'm here to give to others, the service that I'm here to give to others, it's still, right? I have this inner oasis, and this part of me, this demon, wants to turn that into a water utility. And he's not being allowed to do that. And as a result, he's throwing a temper tantrum. And I suffer the result of that. I suffer because of that. And I'm made to feel absolutely terrible, and that everything that I'm doing is futile, and that being an oasis is futile because nobody's drinking from it. And what a waste of resources. And it's a very, very clever, it's the kind of guilt and shame maneuver that even that family member pulled on me and said, well, go and do volunteer work then. Find your place in the machine where you can feel like you're making a difference. This is not the path to mastery over mechanicity and liberation from the machine, to find our place in the machine. That's not mastery of the machine and mastery of one's mechanicity. Mastery comes from accepting limitations, a limited number of constraints, in order to transcend them, to achieve transcendence. Where those limitations are springboards for something profound and unique, and again, transcendent. Because you are, especially when you accept that those limitations, those constraints are there for you to admit to yourself that you're not qualified. That the only thing that can transcend those limitations is that within you, which is transcendent, which is your own inner master, which then comes out and comes through you, and through you transcends the limitations of your own mechanicity, your own mortality. This is genuine mastery. This is the archetype of the superhero, and why the superhero has an alter ego, which is this mortal, hapless, usually mortal, hapless personality. Even Superman has Clark Kent, who's clumsy, who's this, who's that, right? It's this archetype is not there by accident. It's not there that Batman has Bruce Wayne, and Iron Man has Tony Stark, and Spider-Man has Peter Parker. But it's especially true with Peter Parker and Clark Kent, that they're hapless and bumbling, and they're not good with women, and they're clumsy, right? But then as soon as they don the suit, right? Or in the case of Superman, as soon as he takes his glasses off, he ceases to be Clark Kent, and now he becomes Superman. He transcends that mortal self, and he allows the inner Superman to now come through. And that's why he rips open his shirt. Superman is always there underneath his clothes. And with great power comes great responsibility. And that's what that line from Spider-Man that we all have to take to heart, because in very real terms, the one thing that you and I are not qualified to do is to wield transcendent power responsibly. We don't know how to do that. We don't have the capacity to do that. We are not qualified for that. This is why manifesting your desires or performing miracles through chaos magic and healing people through that methodology is black magic and is a crime against karma, because we don't know what kind of harm that we are doing. We don't know what kind of monkey wrench that we're throwing into the system by playing with magic in that way. Only our innermost is qualified And that's why genuine magic is white magic, is performed by our innermost master. That's mastery. Again, that's why all of those superheroes have this archetypal split personality of this hapless mortal self who's not qualified to be a superhero. He's just a normal Joe Schmo. It's his alter ego. It's his higher self. It's the Superman. Because with great power comes great responsibility. But our mortal self, this person we identify with, this personality in this body, is a machine, a human machine. We have to accept that. We have to know ourselves. And we've seen enough science fiction about what happens when a machine grabs hold of infinite power. Never ends well. That's the entire allegory of Ultron. When the Iron Man suit grabs hold of the Tesseract and becomes self-aware, now it's a machine that has the power of the fourth dimension. Then he becomes Ultron, and he's born of Tony Stark's ego. He's a child of Tony Stark's ego. That's Ultron. And his first order of business is to eliminate Tony Stark, and his second order of business is to eradicate humanity from the face of the earth. And we've seen that in Terminator, and we've seen that in the Matrix trilogies, and in countless other science fiction, where mechanicity, that's its job, is to eradicate humanity, or at least civilization, from the planet. And it's doing exactly that. So as tempting as it is, as tempting as it is for someone like me to take advice from family or friends, or from influencers about how to create a following of 100,000 people or 1 million people, and how to build your platform and build your funnels and all this kind of stuff, and get your following, and then like I have a friend who likes to say all the time is, you have so much good content, you have such good content, right? It would be so incredible if we could platform that and get it to more people, and so on and so forth. As tempting and as rational as that may seem, like Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the message. And that platform, this platform, I should say, it's really just, for me to turn my channel into another content rich channel, or content heavy channel, where I'm just pumping out video after video after video, and shorts and all kinds of stuff, and using X and Facebook and Instagram, and creating memes and funnels and all this kind of stuff to build and build and build and build and build that following. Why? So I could take that precious oasis and try to put a pumping station down next to it, and build a pipeline and pump that oasis into everybody's house, or maybe just put a bottling plant next to that oasis, and put that water into a bottle, and take a photo of the oasis and slap it on the side of the bottle on a label, and ship it to stores all over the world, and call it Oasis in a Bottle, and become a millionaire or a billionaire in the process. Something tells me that's just not the way. That's not mastery of mechanicity. That's enslavement to mechanicity. That's falling for the trap. That's eating of the apple. that's believing that somehow the systems of commerce and mechanical systems can achieve what God cannot, or what transcendental methods cannot. And so this is, for me anyway, this is my your relationship with all this will be uniquely attuned to yourself, your level of being, and so on. Just as my relationship, what I am here to master in terms of mastering mechanicity, is unique to me. But what is universal is that what you are here, the mechanicity that you are here to master, is within yourself. It is yourself. It is the unique eccentricities and the unique mechanical algorithms that you find you are living with, and that are, to one degree or another, defining your life and determining your direction and determining your choices and how you apply and how you go about pursuing service to your innermost being. How you do that within the parameters of being inside of this human machine and the algorithms that dictate and govern that human machine, that relationship is going to be unique to you. But again, what's universal is that the mechanical algorithms and the human machine that you are here to master is you. That doesn't change. That is the same for everybody. And the point that the real takeaway for today is that point. And that there is a kind of mastery in the world that allows your human machine to feel like it's achieved mastery over mechanicity. And it may or may not involve your innermost master. I cannot answer that because I don't have a window into your soul. But if you're honest with yourself and you know yourself and you meditate and you pray and you observe yourself and you remember yourself, you will come to know the truth. Are you doing what you were born to do? Are you serving your innermost master here on earth? Yes or no? And have you truly mastered your own mechanicity? Yes or no? For my part, the answer is no. You see, I'm trapped in the machine. And this thing makes me suffer, especially when I'm depressed. But I now know, I now have a greater ability to let go of those desires, knowing now that what I'm made to worry about and what I'm made to feel bad about and feel depressed about, because I have a demon raging over why he's not, why our YouTube channel isn't on the same level as Joe Rogan or whatever, right? Or Alex Ferreira or any of these guys with their these YouTube influencers, because in me there's that demon wants to be an influencer just like they are. Wants that platform, wants that audience, wants to be heard, wants to be needed, wants to be in demand, wants to be valued. And all of that is ego. All of that is a machine. All of that is a hammer looking for nails. All of that is a hammer that sees the world as just filled with nails that need hammering or need pulling. Doesn't care which. It's a hammer. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Let's put our friend Lumiere back up there. I tried say Thursday of last week. I went to the gym to try to work out in a desperate attempt to beat some of the symptoms of this depression, and I I wasn't able to do a single set. It's just I was just so weak. I felt so just no, like, no, forget about having no energy, having no strength, like literally no muscular strength. That's how much this thing drains me. And and so I think I've this well, we'll see, because the demon always likes to find new and clever and insidious ways to make me suffer. So if if the present comprehensions of what the demon is after and what he longs for and what he desires, to that, which would explain why it's still being denied to me, because you can't, it's like Christian at Glorienne would say, he said, God and the devil cannot mix. But that oasis analogy, it speaks a lot to me, because Lawrence of Arabia is one of my favorite movies, and as you know, Lawrence of Arabia takes place in the deserts of Arabia, and so there's lots of oases, lots of wells, which come into play there. And the thing about an oasis is, if you put your faith and trust that the people who need to drink will show up, then all you need to do is do what you do, be. And so I do these live streams, but I'm really backing off on everything else, and I've more or less backed off on everything else. And yeah, my book exists; it's out there in the world. Um, my live stream is here. When people occasionally ask for help, I will offer it to them. But if they don't take it, then it's no sweat off my back. I mean, it's, what more can I do, right? Offer help. If you don't want it or don't take it, that's your business. right? Or that's their business. It's you can't you can't I can't again like put a fire hose down their throat and turn and open up the tap, but that's not how it works. It can't work that way. And even if it could, even if I could somehow be heard by everybody on the planet once a day, it would no longer be special. It would be no longer be meaningful. People wouldn't hear it. It would be in one ear and out the other, and they would take it for granted, just like they take for granted their running water. But the people who need an oasis, who find the oasis, they don't take that oasis for granted. That I think is part of also part of the takeaway here. That the so-called worldly mechanical success that everybody says is a success because it leads to fame and it leads to fortune and it leads to numbers and audience and metrics and followers and all that stuff. Those are all numbers and empirically measured success. But that doesn't tell you anything about otherworldly success, about metaphysical success. Benjamin says, I'd like to break out of the 9-to-5 cycle as well, but supporting my family is what keeps me grounded and motivated to keep moving forward. I'm praying for your healing, and I truly hope you find the clarity, peace, and answers that help ease your depression. Yeah, about that, like nobody is saying, this is not about, quitting your job or not having a job, right? It's we have to be practical, right? I have been looking for a job and been trying to get a job for 15 years. It just wasn't meant to be. It wasn't, eventually I even recently I applied for a job, thought that a job that I thought I would be very good at. And it was a good fit. But of course I'm a straight white male, so that company was woke and they weren't going to consider me anyway, but regardless. Um, the point is having to have a job in order to exist and to feed for your family and to fend for your family is one thing. But making that your identity and your purpose for being, that's something else entirely. And Benjamin also says, thank you so much for today's live stream, sir. I truly appreciate the time, insight, and energy you shared with everyone. Well, thanks for being here, Benjamin. And thank all of you for being here. It's my pleasure, of course, to be here. It was rough gearing up for today, but everything happens for a reason, and again, there's something here that I'm going to continue exploring deeper, because when I talk in recent weeks, when I've included in the subtitles of these live streams how that there are secrets contained in these live streams, I really do mean that. There's secret keys to unlocking deeper levels and higher levels of being. At least recently, I've certainly felt that I've been knocking on the door of deeper levels and higher levels. And I've certainly been feeling, descending into deeper levels of depression. And in accordance with the Alm of Life, that means the potential for higher levels of advancement. But in order to do that, we have to comprehend and slay the demons on the levels that we are, in the depths that we are going to. So I'll continue my work on that front, and I'll report back. When I, whenever I can, which is, once a week. Andrew says, "Thank you for being an oasis." You're most welcome. You're most welcome. It's my privilege and my pleasure to be here for all of you, for however many of you show up. Right? Doesn't an oasis doesn't judge themselves by who shows up and who doesn't. Right? That would be an unfair and an altogether inappropriate way of looking at oneself if one was an oasis. Right? How many people showed up, or how many people? That's not up to the oasis. Right? But it's really hard for the demon of fear, the demon of control, to relinquish that, to accept that I don't have any control on who shows up. Another way to look at this, by the way, would be a flower, right? How many bees visited that flower today? I mean, it's like there are many phenomena that are like this. The sun is like this, right? The sun shines. It shines. It's up to us whether or not we want to go outside or not, right? And look at the sun, or if we want to stay indoors. That's entirely up to us. The sun has no say in it. The sun can't come down and beat down your door and come into your house and shine in your face. The sun doesn't do that. And neither did Christ. On that note, thank you everyone once again for coming by and spending some time in this oasis. Hopefully next time we'll have a more pleasant background for you to look at. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of those whom you care for, and I hope to see you next week. And as always, inferential peace. Take care, everyone.